G'day, Brent. How you going?
Good, Matt. How are you today?
Thanks. So we've got Brent Adamson, who has an illustrious career. Brent, why don't you talk us through some of the things you've done and who you are?
I'm just for the people in the States, I'm just a schlub from Omaha, Nebraska. For people in Australia, you don't know where that is, but I'm just um, so I have spent, I guess, Matt, the thing that'd be most relevant for your listeners is the last 20 years or so, I have spent researching and trying to understand as best as possible with really smart people what does world-class B2B selling look like. So I did that at a company called Corporate Executive Board, or CEB, which is where we wrote the Challenger Sale and the Challenger Customer, and a bunch of articles and other research. Then that CEB was bought by Gartner, so I stayed around at Gartner for about 5 years, left Gartner about 2 years ago, joined a SaaS firm for about a year and a half, left that. I'm out on my own now doing a couple different things. One, writing the next book, which will be out in the fall. And I've started with actually two Australians, a company called Q's, which is spelled QOOS, with Darren Watson, Graham Hawkins, which is sort of AI enabled sales training embedded right into your CRM system. So I got a lot going on. Before all that, by the way, before most of your listeners were born, I was a German professor because, of course, everyone is a German professor at some point in their lives, right? So there you go.
Well, I'm missing that bit. I'm not, and I haven't been. So that's something I've got.
Add it to your bucket list, man. Come on now.
I love it. I love it. How
Yeah.
good. Now, everyone's familiar with the sales side of your career. Something
Yeah.
that fascinates me, and I think it's underappreciated is culture and the place that culture has in driving performance and revenue. What's some of your insights around there?
Well, it's funny. The so again, some of this ties back to what I was doing before I ever got into sales as a research topic. So my whole career has really been around research. Just at the way back when I first started in the late '90s or really mid '90s. The research I was doing then was in linguistics and languages and language learning and psychology and pedagogy and all this kind of stuff. But as part of that, there was a lot of liberal arts degrees and a lot of reading, a lot of literature. And when you start reading, you do all that kind of work. You really dive deep into sort of the human condition, human relations, things like empathy and understanding and just different ways of looking at things. And all that has really served me, I think, pretty well, sort of where we are today, because this theme of empathy has really found its way to marble through all the research I've done. In the world of sales, we're so focused, I think, Matt, maybe arguably so on the sort of the transactional side. What are the three best questions to ask in a discovery call? Or how do I run my sales process? Or, what day of the week should I send this cold email? Um, the things I've become fascinated have really all been fascinated in all along. And it's really in the heart of Challenger and all the work I'm doing now too, is that for now, at least, sales is humans talking to humans. It's trying to get humans to engage in different kinds of behaviors, to sort of modify their thinking, to see the world from a different perspective, not in a manipulative sort of way, but hopefully at least in a helpful sort of way. And what I have found is when it comes to either selling or leading, really, for that matter, having that strong degree of empathy and being able to see sort of the world from someone else's eyes and understand sort of how they see it, not just so you can just talk to them that way, but so you can help them. It's hard for me to bring you from this position to that position unless I kind of know how you see the position you're in already. And so um, all of that, to me, when you say culture, I guess I went in a slightly different direction, but culture to me is tied up in that ability to see the world through different perspectives and find sort of the connections across them, if that makes any sense at all. See, this is the problem, by the way, Matt, of doing a podcast with an Australian, because yes, it is the middle of the day. You just had lunch. You're great. It's 10 o'clock at night, so I'm just rambling right now. There you go.
No,
Right.
you and you started jogging a lot of thoughts in my mind, and a lot
Yeah,
of the coaching I do is around active listening, Stephen Covey's level of listening, starting with
totally.
ignoring, finishing with empathetic listening. And a lot of the conversations we end up having is you don't want to appear to be a salesperson because no one likes being sold to. Simple as that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
once you create a connection and talk, you want to be an agony aunt if you like, because then they're going to unload all of the problems and then you marry up the solution. So when you were
Right.
talking about that, tying it into the leadership piece and
Yeah.
culture, I
Yeah.
suppose that a lot of employees feel like they're being spoken at, not, not spoken, I suppose, not taking their feelings into account,
Yeah.
what drives them. And then that's that cultural piece. When people feel valued, when they are recognized, etc., it probably allows them to open up a little bit more, the same as a prospect or a customer might.
I totally agree. I think in some ways, I wrote this down so I can do it again, but people really, in some ways, they kind of want we all want lots of things. Like, I'd like a bigger paycheck, I suppose, but we want safety. We want to feel safe. We want to feel seen, and we want to feel appreciated, right? And I think in culture, when you create a really high functioning culture where people can really outperform, you're creating a culture where people feel safe in like, I'm not about to get fired. I'm not about to get called, thrown under the table, under the bus because I didn't do this assignment the right way, or whatever it is, or I have a boss that's going to steal my ideas. There's 1,000 different ways that safety, quote unquote, manifests in a work environment. But I just want to feel safe. I want to feel seen. I want to feel appreciated. I want to feel respected, right? I want to make sure that people understand my contribution, the fact that, I got up early, or I'm missing dinner with my kids or whatever. There's 1,000 different ways you want to feel seen and just appreciated and recognized. And so it's this safety and seen. And then you want to feel a certain amount of control as well. Like, I have some agency in what's happening in my career. I've got, if I put in a little extra work, I can advance a little further. That it's sort of a merit-based sort of system, at least in, well, it's, most of us will gravitate to that. Some of us perhaps won't, but I think these ideas of safety and control and being seen are things that, if I had to simplify sort of how to create a really high functioning culture, I'd say so for that.
And what about being understood? So rather than just being
Yeah,
a pawn in a game which is being moved around and told what to do, truly getting into them and understanding their psyche and what drives them and what's going on in their world, and
yeah,
working with them and how they can
yeah,
tie that into the overall business and how they can
yeah.
get the most out of it themselves.
Totally. It is, excuse me, it's the, whether there's a number of different dimensions that, whether it's affirmation or recognition, right? Or appreciation, lots of Shun's words, but it's, I don't know, Matt. I don't know you, Matt, but maybe again, it's 10:30 at night here, so I get a little philosophical at the end of the day, but look, we're all mortal. Do you know what I mean? Not to get really big on this. I went like 1,000, feet clicks up in altitude here, but we're all going to be gone at some point. And I think maybe I'm just speaking as a 56-year-old man who's got that finish line coming up a little faster than some, but I think we all want to know that we're making a difference, that our time here on earth, as short as it is, has been meaningful, that we've contributed, that there's a reason for us to be here, that maybe there's even going to be a little piece of us that's remembered once we're gone. And you'd like to think that that applies at a family level, but certainly at a professional level too. And we spend so much of our time at work or doing work, and you kind of like to believe that somehow it meant something, right? And so having, people don't talk about this kind of stuff, but being a leader and sharing your appreciation of someone's work, of their effort, of their time is literally saying, I see you and you matter. Your time here is worthwhile. This stuff ties it. It goes from this very superficial thing, and it sounds kind of, tree huggy or whatever, like, oh, appreciate your people. But there's some deep seated stuff rooted at the heart of this that I think really matters for all of us.
Do you know, now we're going to go darker and probably even further into the stratosphere. I
All
was
right.
working with this. I was working with this young guy recently, early
Yeah.
20s, and we started talking about goals. And he goes, "I
Yeah.
suck at goal setting." So he said,
Yeah.
"You don't suck at goal setting." What it really was he'd never really given it any thought. So we worked through it in a
Yeah.
really short period of time. He came up with the most amazing goals that he wants to support his mother with tangible outcomes, a certain amount of money,
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera. And I said to him, I said, because in Australia, and it could be the same as the US,
Mm-hmm.
young males are like at the highest rate of suicide at the
Yeah.
moment. And I
Yeah.
started thinking about it, and I said to him, I said, do you think that part of that, probably driven by COVID as well, but part of that is that people in your age group don't understand their purpose, or they actually haven't given it any thought? And this ties back into what you're saying, that mortality, we want to make an impact, want to be remembered to a certain extent, but we want to contribute. Do you think that there's a generation, and that's probably pretty broad, but do you think there's
Mhm.
groups of people, subsets, who just haven't spent time thinking about why they're doing things, why they're doing sales, why they're chasing commission, what they actually want out of life?
Yeah. I think that's all of us really to some degree or another, other than the handful of very self-aware people out there. I mean, I don't know about you, and I'm guessing you're at least a little bit younger than me, but that run from 30 to 50 years old is a blink of an eye, isn't it? I mean, it's just, it's, you wake up one day, and again, I'm 50, I think I'm 56 at least, but I'm somewhere around there. But it's like you wake up one day, and by the way, just to be clear, age has never been an issue for me. I've not been one of those people who's like, oh, don't talk about my age, or, get depressed on your birthday. But one day I woke up and I turned 50, and it's like, holy bleep, what the hell happened? It's like you're a 20 something, to your point, looking for like, I got to figure out what I'm going to be when I grow up and climb the ladder of whatever I'm going to do. And how do I get better? And how do I earn more money? And all of a sudden you're 50 and it's like, okay, this thing's got a finish line. It's like, how the hell did that happen? And it's just, and what happens, we all just get busy living, because you have, particularly if you have kids, right? All of a sudden you start living your life through the lens of your children, and you're trying to focus on what's best for them. And the dirty little secret is none of us know what we're doing as parents, right? So you're constantly beating yourself up for things that you don't really know what you're doing. I mean, I've been a parent for 19 years, and I literally have no idea what I'm doing. I like no idea, but yeah, hopefully they seem okay. I think no one's been arrested yet, so that's good.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
but it's like, it's so, and then people say, so, well, you need to do a better job of goal setting. It's like, dude, you're not wrong, but I'm just trying to figure out how to like get bleep done. I don't know. I have a lot of sympathy for people who aren't super self-aware about those things, because maybe it's my own ADHD, or whatever it is, but I struggle with that kind of stuff too. It's hard.
Yeah, absolutely it is. Let's shift into, staying on the culture piece, but shift
Yeah.
into people who become leaders. They're often the top
Yeah.
salespeople, or they're the people who've been there the longest. How do they cultivate those skills? What have you seen in your research over the years of leaders, sales leaders? What makes a great sales
Yeah.
leader? What do they do differently? And then I suppose we can pivot into why, when they leave, do sales often drop?
Yeah, there's so that you and I talked about this the other day just briefly, and it's a super interesting thing I've watched in my career. So let's start at the beginning, sort of that, first of all, and I would imagine you and I would agree on this, but it's contrary to what you just said. So maybe we can explore it first, which is, not all great sellers make great leaders. Would you agree? Yeah,
Absolutely. In
right.
fact,
We've
I
all
would say
seen that.
I
Yeah,
would say it's often the opposite.
right. Yeah. As long as we're not saying if you're a horrible seller, you're going to be a good leader. Right. But right. The point is, the two don't always co-present, right? So and what's really interesting is, I've had a number of very good friends over the years, and just people I've known who've been world-class sellers, who've chosen to stay world-class sellers, and not, and just they were able to sort of self-diagnose, I'm not very good at management, and they've just continued to have incredibly stellar careers. And what's interesting, I think you'd agree, Matt, is over time, is those individuals wind up sort of in sort of almost informal leadership roles, right? They become sort of the big brother, or the coach, or the mentor, or whatever, language, or big sister, I suppose. But and in some ways, my career at CB Gartner was 19 years of an individual contributor, and I kind of became like that. So I thought at the beginning of my career I wanted to manage large teams and be a general manager, and run P&Ls and all that kind of stuff, because that was like, particularly on the, it was just kind of, that was the measure of success, right? It's like, how big's your team? So um and then I fell into this individual contributor role relatively early on, and I stayed there the entire time, and it was amazing. It was having no performance reviews to do, having no, like, not being responsible directly for someone's development, but yet being involved in so many people's development through coaching and mentoring was really, it was pretty incredible. But some people do have that gene, and you've seen it too, right? Some people they're just, first of all, I think they have this process orientation, which is where I struggle madly. But they can run a process, they can run with structure, but then they've got this sort of deep empathy gene at the same time. So they're good at planning, they're good at strategizing, they're good at process, but they're also good at people. Let's face it, that's not a lot of people who are good at all those things simultaneously. But I've had the pleasure, I'm sure you have too, of meeting a number of people like this, particularly because I work in sales. I've known a number of sales leaders, some of whom are now CEOs, who are just deeply good across the board at process, strategy, and people simultaneously. And boy, are they, and I'll tell you something, they're some of the nicest people I've ever met. Some of them I'm just lucky enough now to call friends, because they're just, that kind of person you meet and you think, I'm just not as good as you. You're just better. You
You
know what I
just got it
mean?
worked out.
Right. You're just a better human being. I give up. Right. But they're just wonderful people. What I found, though, that I think is really interesting, is what you and I were talking about the other day, is when someone of that caliber runs a company, or runs, let's say, a sales organization, because that's really what we're talking about today, and they do profoundly quality work. The team outperforms. There's structure, there's order, there's a strategy, there's a clear purpose, there's a culture, to your point, of winning. And particularly early on in Challenger, I worked with a number of leaders like this, where we rolled out Challenger into organizations like this, and you could always tell when Challenger was going to work really well, because we had someone like this at the front of it, whether it was a CEO or head of sales. And what's always been interesting, and it doesn't have to be Challenger, like it could be just anything they're working on, when that person leaves, things just kind of fall apart. They don't necessarily go completely in the crapper, excuse my language, or they don't go, it's not a total disaster, but the edge is off. And so things just kind of, they're just diminished. And I've come to learn as a result over my career just how much of an impact individuals truly can have at that level. That it really does matter a lot, doesn't it, of who's
Because
running
they've
an
got the same
organization.
processes, they've got all the tools, they've got the same people,
Yeah.
yet the leader is missing. So is that
Yeah.
guidance? Is it energy, culture? The enjoyability has gone from work. Could be a new manager put in place who doesn't have those skill set. It's so
Yeah,
interesting.
right. It is, isn't it? Right. And I'm not a leadership expert, and people, of course, there are leadership experts. People write books, an endless number of books on this topic. But yeah, I think it's everything you just said. Right. It's almost like the spark. It's an energy, but that energy is manifest in things like culture, and just the mood. And I think what also happens, of course, we've all seen this, is when a new leader comes in, they feel the need to put their stamp on it, to kind of take ownership of things. And so one of the easiest and best ways to do that is to take everything that's happened before and throw it out the window, or at least a lot of it, right? And we see this in politics all the time when one party takes over from another party, which is madly frustrating because there's baby and there's bathwater. And oftentimes the two get mixed up in this process of what gets thrown out. And it's very, very rare to see um, a leader with the kind of take over and just keep the momentum. There's, at the very least, there's always a dip, um, and oftentimes it's unrecoverable.
I agree. Let's go to the individual contributor level. So,
Yeah,
I mean, really, really broad question. What makes a great individual contributor as opposed to the leader? Like, what's some of those key character traits?
I don't know, man. What do you think? Let me ask you. What do you think?
There's got to be an element of selfishness in there, but positive
Yeah,
selfishness, as in, I'm going to make this happen. There's got
yeah,
to be that. And there's also got to be, there's drive, because there's easier
yeah,
than jobs. If you've got a target, like, and you're not into it, go work for the council. Go do something much easier, and you can live a really easy, stress-free existence
yeah,
if that's what you want. So I think
yeah,
those top contributors are personable, natural rapport builders. That's probably a big
yeah.
one. Organized and driven. If I had to summarize it, I would say those points.
What about this? What about the first word that came to mind was a swagger. You know what I mean? They're just, but that sometimes has an arrogance component to it, but which
Like a
is not always
natural
there.
salesperson.
Yeah, right. Either a swagger or quiet confidence is the other term that kind of came to mind. But they're comfortable in their own ability. Do you know what I mean? And that's when when it comes to like keynotes, for delivering keynotes, a guy, goodness knows, I could do a better job, and sometimes I have good days and bad days. But I feel pretty confident getting up on a stage in front of 500 people and speaking, because it's kind of what I do for a living and I've done it for decades, right? So, and other people, of course, freak out about that kind of stuff. And so I think individual contributors, they just kind of know their lane and they just know what they're good at, and they feel they always prepare. They never take it for granted, but they have a certain sort of quiet confidence that, like, yeah, I got this, which I always admire, particularly in sales. I mean, really world class individual contributor salespeople, God, they're pretty badass, aren't they? They're just,
Oh yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. And to the original conversation,
yeah.
if you're that amazing and you're driven by money, why on earth would you be looking for status in people management, leadership,
Oh
CEO?
God, no, right? Exactly. You're
It
gonna make a
doesn't make
lot more
any
money.
sense. Oh, a
I know
lot
it
more
does.
money.
Right?
Doesn't make
You're
any
going to
sense
make,
at all.
with until you get into the CEO level. I mean, you're probably going to make as much money as an individual contributor, and you're going to have more fun doing it. And frankly, you're going to be better because you don't have the headaches of managing people, which is hard. It's really, really hard.
It's super hard. It is.
Yeah.
Something we spoke about last time, which I found really, really interesting. Everybody's talking about how buyers have changed.
Mm-hmm.
Even since the Challenger days, there's more people
Yep.
involved in decision making. There's more
Yeah.
stakeholders. You got to navigate that landscape. You've got a different take on it. And I think it might be a theme in your upcoming book
It
around
is.
buyers. Why don't you talk us through that?
So this will tie sort of the conversation together, sort of the themes we were talking about at the beginning of the conversation, because in many ways, the stuff that I'm working on now, and so again, I've got this Q's project over here, and then I've got this other company where we're writing the book and rolling out the training and the keynotes and all that kind of stuff. The book will be out in September. It's called The Framemaking Sale. And the starting point of this book in many ways is some research that I was involved in when I was still at Gartner. And it essentially, what we were trying to do at the time was understand what needs to happen inside of a deal, a large scale enterprise level commercial sale, in order to increase the likelihood of a customer buying what we call a high quality, low regret deal. So this is simply a deal where the customer doesn't settle. They don't settle for status quo. They don't settle for the pilot. They buy the bigger solution with the broader scope, the higher price point. But while they're buying that bigger, more complex solution, they feel good about it at the same time. So it's high quality, low regret. Okay. That's about as technical as I get, I promise. But so there's the team there, and a lot of this work is still ongoing at Gartner. Some really talented people doing this. But we've been trying for years to understand what needs to happen in order to increase the likelihood of that outcome, of that high quality, low regret deal. The thing that's come out over and over and over again in different kinds of this research is this: the single biggest driver of a high quality, low regret deal is not a sales technique. It's not a sales approach. It's not a sales tool. It's not a piece of technology. It's not a marketing content piece. It's not even something about the customers organization or process. It's not about go to market. It's one thing. It is the degree to which customers themselves report a high level of confidence in the decision that they're making on behalf of their company. So we call this decision confidence. So in some ways, when you hear this, it kind of like feels like a no duh, but it'll take a left turn in a second. But the bumper sticker point is the number one thing that we need to solve for in sales in order to decrease the likelihood of these big deals or just winning in general is solving for customers' confidence. How confident are they to make that buying decision in the first place? Now, the one thing, Matt, that I run into a lot when I talk about this, particularly sort of at this point in the story, you get a lot of like, oh yeah, of course, particularly from CEOs, like I agree, Brett. This is why we've been talking about confidence for years. This is why we need to make sure customers are confident in our product. They're confident in our people. They're confident in our brand. We need to be a thought leader. We need to be a trusted advisor. All of that is true to some degree, but that's not what this is about. Because when you dive into this thing called decision confidence, and you peel back the layers of the research, what you find is so interesting is the thing that customers need to be confident in isn't you, the supplier. It's themselves as buyers and deciders. It's things like, how confident are we that we've even asked the right questions? How confident are we that we've thoroughly examined alternatives, which, by the way, in the world of AI changing everything on a weekly basis, you're never really confident. How confident are we that that we've done enough research? Well, in a world where we're awash in information, you're never really confident you've done enough research because there's always more you can do. And so what we found is that the single biggest driver of sales, of commerce, isn't just not supplier centric, it's actually supplier agnostic. That the thing that we need to solve for is customers' not perception of us, but customers' perceptions of themselves. And that, I think, is what's so interesting. This feels like, to me, this is why I'm all in on black. It's like literally I quit my job and I put everything on sort of all in on writing this book and getting this out there, because I just think it's such an interesting idea that what if our biggest opportunity in sales today is to solve for not customers' supplier perception, but to solve for customers' self-perception? What would that even look like? What would that feel like? What would that motion look like? How would we do that? And what can we get from it? So that's what this is all about.
Does it tie into people not wanting to put their head on the chopping block to make a decision? Is it giving them
Yeah.
confidence around that?
Yeah, it is. Well, so yes, that's absolutely part of it. Is the customers, of course, as the scope and size of these deals goes up and things become more expensive, but also just like there's more dominoes. Like, if I'm going to buy this solution around, identity theft or something, or risk mitigation and cloud identity or whatever. I'm just making stuff up now, but it's like that ties into my IT strategy. It ties into my users. Am I going to spend money? No one's using it. Am I going to, is it actually going to work? Right. So there's as these solutions become more complex, touch more parts of the organization, more people get involved, things just get harder. And so the reason why this confidence story, I think, matters so much right now is that I think there's a number of different challenges that customers are facing that are dramatically undermining their confidence today in ways that just weren't really an issue 15 years ago when we wrote Challenger. So it's things like decision complexity. It's a little bit of what you already hinted at. The number of people involved in a typical B2B purchase has gone up dramatically. So the last number we had at Gartner was about 11 on average, but I was talking to a big company you guys everyone would know in cloud computing the other day, and they said, we're doing deals at the enterprise level with 50 to 100 to 200 people in them. And so at some point, it's like, I love you, Matt. I love your solution. If we're just up to me, I'd buy it now, but I'm not confident that I'm going to get the buy-in from these 15 other people. And so So again, I'm confident in you, I'm confident in me, I'm confident in your product. I'm just not confident in my organization. This is why we can't have nice things, right? So there's decision complexity, there's information overload. We're just bombarded. Everybody wants to be a thought leader, so we're all just spamming the world with smart stuff, and so customers are just completely confused. There is objective misalignment, which is all of these people involved in a purchase aren't just, it's just not just a lot of them, but there's a lot of different people. Someone from IT, someone from the chief information security officer. Now the legal team wants to get involved. What about procurement? What about I don't know, the Asia Pac office, right? So everybody's got sort of a different perspective on what problem we should even be solving for in the first place, let alone what solution we should apply, let alone what supplier to select. And so again, I may be confident in us working together. I may be confident in your solution, but I'm not confident that my colleagues even agreed that I should be doing this. We should be doing this in the first place. And then the last one's around outcomes, is outcome uncertainty, which is you can show me all the case studies in the world around how much value your solutions deliver to other companies. But if I don't believe that, the thing's like, no, I believe you, man. I believe that you've done that for 3 other companies, but we'll find some way to screw it up because we're just dysfunctional here. So I don't lack confidence in you. I lack confidence in me or my company. So again, it's decision complexity, information overload, objective misalignment, outcome uncertainty. All of those things today have become so complex that they have this corrosive effect on customer confidence, to the degree where oftentimes customers say, it's just easier just not to decide or not to choose. And then we sit around in sales thinking, well, that stinks. How the hell am I supposed to sell into this world? And what I am so interested in is, what if you took it on yourself to be the agent of confidence? What if you are not just a confidence seeker? I'm going to go around and find deals where customers are confident, sell into them. But what if your job became, or your opportunity became, a confidence creator? I'm going to go help these people feel more confident across those 4 dimensions, such that they're more likely to make a decision. That's
Does it
pretty
mean
cool.
longer sales cycles then?
I think sales cycles are longer no matter what. Yeah. So so that's one of the things we're trying to do with this work, is to decrease really long sales. So this is like, how do we speed up decisions? We're never going to get back to like, hey, there's very few companies out there doing decisions in 3 months or less, unless you're product led and you're selling through a credit card online. That, in product led growth, that's a different kind of motion. But in enterprise, we're just 6 months if you're lucky, 12 to 18, right? I mean, these sales cycles are so long. And part of the reason why is because customers have to keep beating their heads against the wall and running into their own obstacles. What I've become interested in is, what if we became sort of almost like a decision coach, almost like a Sherpa? I'm going to guide you through the complexities of your own decision making inside your company, such that we can move through this quicker and you can feel more confident in your ability to do it.
Such an interesting perspective. It really is. And it comes back to the whole empathetic approach that we were talking about.
Exactly.
That's exactly what it ties in with. It's not so much trusted advisor. It's, I'm empathetic to your internal issues. I'm not just focusing on me and my commission, how good our product is. So short of getting in there as a consultant and giving them critical thinking frameworks and decision making frameworks. How? What's some easy techniques?
Well, so that in fact is why we call this the Framemaking Sale. To your point about frameworks, is because this idea of this, it's not a new term of art per se, although we're applying it to sales in a way that's never been applied to sales before, which is this idea of, how can I engage in this act of frame making? So taking something that's big and hard and overwhelming, like all these dimensions I just talked about, and just making it feel a little easier, a little bit more manageable. Just like, help me take this massive decision-making process I don't even understand in my own company, and to make it feel like, oh, it's those 5 people. So one of the things we've actually, not to get too wonky on you, but we try to lengthen it's sort of the back of the book to get in some of the details around this. There's frameworks, which can be kind of complicated, things like diagnostic exercises and maturity models and, implementation guides. Some of those things can actually be incredibly helpful, but they also take time. But that's a framework, is a very structured sort of set of steps, or, sort of a model for thinking about something. And that's all part of frame making. But there's also just the act of framing, which is much simpler, which is, for example, and we tell all sorts of stories about things like this in the book, but there's a story we tell from a human capital management company where, they're selling payroll services, things like that, and benefit services to heads of HR. And there's one company that you would know, this is a global company, I've gotten to know them over the years. One of their best sellers had kind of figured out, every time I try to do one of these deals, it takes 12 to 18 months. And, we get about month 14 and we think we're getting close to the finish line. And these are multi-million-dollar deals. And then freaking procurement gets involved and they just blow everything up. And all of a sudden the thing stalls, it gets sidelined. It's just like, we're going, and now we're moving in slow motion. And what this particular seller, we call her Tara in the book, but it's not actually her real name, but what she realized is kind of what, smart sellers will just kind of figure out over time. It's like, gosh darn it, see, procurement always gets involved late and they blow everything up and it slows everything down. What she had this aha moment, which is early on in sales, she says to the head of HR, which is her senior decision maker she's calling on, she'll say, hey, in working with other companies like you who get really excited about working together, we're excited to work with you, but we find that what'll happen eventually is procurement's going to get involved. And when they get involved, they're going to blow everything up. And because they're going to have a series of questions and there's going to kind of come out of left field, I'd hate to see that happen to you. So one of the things that I've been suggesting to my clients in doing this work together is that you might want to get procurement involved early. In fact, I'd encourage you to bring them in actually right about now and let's have a discussion together. And by the way, here are the 3 questions they're going to ask. And here's the best answers to it. And here's the data you're going to need to have that conversation. See, so now I haven't built a framework. I haven't built a maturity model. I'm just offering advice. Do you know what I mean? I'm just saying, and one of the ways there's a really interesting sort of aspect about this, Matt, that showed up in our data too, but it's also very practical, which is it's the way I position it. It's the way I convey that advice, which is not, hey, Matt, I've been doing this for 30 years and I've seen everything under the sun and this can go wrong. Here's what you need to do. So in other words, that's sort of adopting what we call the perspective or the role of the expert. And what we've found is when you do that, you actually do damage. It doesn't actually help. For me to show up and say, I've been doing this for many, many years. Here's what you need to do. Because if you think about it, what I'm doing there in that context is I'm solving for your confidence in me. Hey, Matt, trust me. I've been doing this for a long time. You need to be confident in me. But if I take that same idea, but package it differently and say, Matt, I'm so excited to work with you. But one thing I want to mention is I've done a lot of work with a lot of companies similar to yours. And one of the things in working with those companies that I've learned from them that's been really interesting to watch them kind of struggle here is that, but the one kind of figured this out is to bring in procurement early. And so working with other customers like you, one of the things we've been surprised to learn that can really help to bring in procurement. So now what I'm doing is I'm not telling you my opinion. Rather than playing the role of the expert, I'm playing the role of the connector. I'm connecting you to the one thing you want to know more than anything else, which is what do other companies like us do? And that's value. There's real value in your role as a seller to bring to the table perspectives from other companies like your prospect or your current customer, because that's really what they want to know. And so we call this the phrase that pays, somewhat tongue in cheek, but it's like in working with other companies like you, one of the things we've learned is and just to offer what's called social proof, right? Because again, social proof turns out to be a very powerful tool in helping someone feel more confident, is knowing that other people like them have made similar choices. And so this all, again, these are kind of, I got into the weeds a little bit, but these are sort of at the tactical level, these ideas of framing and social proof and things like that are ways that you can play the role as a seller of helping build customers' self-confidence.
We couldn't be more aligned on that. And that was probably, out of all the methodologies and the training over the years, it was really that 30-second commercial from Sandler. It was that storytelling element. And I see that as, and it comes back to empathy once again.
Yeah.
Being able to tell a story from a common, a similar customer to them allows them to have an agony aunt moment where they can open up, they feel understood. And I think that not only does that sit there, it was really interesting the way you said that with procurement, because it's going to bring the sales cycle forward. It's going to get more buy-in at a point where it might have stalled anyway, but at least you're bringing more people in. But I see that storytelling element sitting in so many different go-to-market functions, in account management, relationship management, success, sales,
marketing,
SDR functions.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's the thing that I spend the majority of my time. Can you hear me? I think that.
Yeah. No, I got you. Yep.
I spend the majority of my time flipping people's thinking, because then you're moving away from feature and you're going into storytelling mode, and it builds credibility as well with being able to list a couple of similar customers to them.
It's also interesting too, is kind of just expanding on your point around empathy and storytelling. When you unpack these dimensions of confidence, so one of the first things that jumps out is it turns out it's not customers' confidence in you, but customers' confidence in themselves. So I mentioned that already. The other thing is these dimensions of confidence are things like, again, how confident are we asked the right questions? How confident are we that we did sufficient research? And what's really interesting is if you unpack each of those dimensions, what you find out really is Well, so there's no objective finish line to the end. So in other words, I could ask you, Matt, like, okay, got it. So I need you to be confident you ask the right questions. So here's a question. Which questions are the right questions? Are those the right questions? Or are these the right questions? What if you think those are the right questions, but I think those are the right questions? It's like, well, crap, I don't know. It's like, who defines right? What's rightness even mean, right? So this goes back to my liberal arts degree a little bit. Like, all right, skip that one. Let's move on. Like, how confident are we did sufficient research? Great. What does sufficient mean? We looked at this for 4 months. Was that sufficient? I looked at this all night. I pulled it out. Was that sufficient? Well, if it goes wrong, it wasn't sufficient, right? So and you can go down the line with all of these dimensions, like thorough. What the hell does thorough mean, right? So they're all subjective. None of them have a objective finish line. In other words, you're confident in these things not when you know that they're right or that you know that they're thorough, you've been thorough or you know it was sufficient, but rather when you feel that they're right, when you feel that it was sufficient and when you feel it was thorough. And so that to me is like this really interesting thing. So we're so focused in sales because of the way we're trained, because it feels easier, because of what we instinctively do. We're so focused on trying to get our customers to know something. I want you to know our value prop. I want you to know our speeds and feeds, our products and features. I want you to know about our company. I want you to know what everyone else has said. I'm solving for what you know. But the single biggest driver of a deal is not what customers know, but it's what they feel. And specifically, do they feel confident in this very subjective way? And it's like this just I don't want to, when I say over half, I don't mean in a bar chart sense, but like there's this huge chunk, it's making it very untechnical. There's this huge part of just getting a sale done that's sitting right here that we're all walking right past because we're all just so focused on it. What do I need to say? What do I need them to hear? What do I need them to know? And it's like, what if you were to come at it from what do I need them to feel? And so that's where things like empathy and storytelling, to get you to feel something, I kind of have to know how you feel right now. So that ties into empathy. To convey a feeling, you can package that in a story, which is your point about storytelling, right? So these are the tools of the toolkit of the star performer that they use every single day and don't even fully realize they're doing it. Do you know what I mean? They're just good at it.
Yeah, they're just good at it. They're just born. They're
Yeah.
just those people. Now,
Yeah.
we're starting to get short on time.
Yeah.
This comes back to, what are your thoughts on discovery? So I'm going to pre-frame it.
Yeah.
Discovery, in my experience, when I talk to people about the discovery phase, they either feel that's just a one-off and it's a stage in a sales process, or they feel that it never ends and it sort of happens the whole way through.
Yeah.
And or they think that discovering is information gathering about a customer.
Yeah. Right.
My thoughts around it are, discovery is storytelling to uncover the challenges and the true problems, learning about it and multi-threading based on that and doing everything that we're just talking about.
Yeah.
It's really getting to the core of what everybody's problems are and I suppose how they feel. I suppose what I'm throwing out is, how do you see discovery? Is it that information gathering or is it a mixture of all of it?
It's a little bit of all. We tried in the book to put some structure around it because this goes back to objective misalignment, which is I can quote unquote discover your needs. I can ask you what's keeping you up at night, or what are you working on, or what do you have to get right this year, and you might give me, or what are challenges, 1,000 different versions of these old tried and true questions. And you can give me a list, and I can write down your pain points and all that kind of stuff. But what I really need to know is, where does that fit into everything else that's going on in your company? And how does that fit in with like the 5 other people involved in the sale? And how do I help you feel more confident to get them and, aligned to all these things? What we've we've developed this idea called value framing, which is just like helping customers frame what's even important to them, not framing our value, but helping them understand, like, what are y'all just trying to do? And so the framework we use is objectives, tactics, and results. Or if you want to get a little more technical, objectives, tactics, tricks, targets, and timelines. So what are you trying to do? So as I'm asking you, all right, what's your objective? What's the objective of the other? Who else is involved? What objectives are they trying to face? How does your objective ladder up into one of their objectives? How do they connect? Every objective's got a tactic, or at least, multiple tactics oftentimes. Like, okay, we're trying to expand market share by 2% in Europe or something like that, right? How are you going to do that? What are the 2 or 3 tactics that you're going to deploy to try to make that happen? What are the metrics you're going to use to measure progress? So what are you trying to do? How will you know when you get there? What target are you going to set? So we want to increase by 3%. Would be a metric where increase share. So share is your metric, by 3% your target. In 6 months would be your timeline. So metrics, targets, timelines. And what we found is this idea of objectives, tactics, metrics, targets, timelines becomes this really nice framework to help organize stakeholders' thinking around what are they trying to do. Because if there's any disagreement at any one of those levels, like, you think we should go after it with that tactic? I think we should go after it with that tactic. Oh, you want to measure it that way? I think we should measure it this way. You think it's going to take 6 months? I think it's going to take 12 months. Every one of those 5 layers creates surface area for potential disagreement. And every one of those disagreements erodes confidence that we should even, not that we should buy your stuff, that we should even be going in this direction in the first place. Right. And so I think of discovery not as discovery. I think of discovery as this collaborative exercise where you're working with customers, sort of guiding them, coaching them through this process of getting them to align top to bottom, from objective to tactic to metric to target to timeline. And that allows them to see, when they get that aligned, then they can look at what you're doing and say, oh, that is valuable. Or they may get all that aligned, look at you and say, you're irrelevant. But now I know. So now I know to, like that, then that becomes a qualification metric. Right now I know, like, well, turns out what these guys are trying to do and they agree on has nothing to do with us. Let's go fishing in a different pond. Now I can use challenger techniques and other things to guide them, say, are you sure that's the best tactic? Here's a different way to think about it. Right. So I can guide and nudge them along the way. And I think that's what's so interesting about discovery. It's your point, which is, discovery is in many ways perceived as this act of just receiving. Like, I'm going to ask you questions and you're going to tell me what you're working on, and I'm just going to write it down or record it. But what if your opportunity was to guide discovery, to tell them what they should be working on, or at least to share a perspective, help them think through, and then help them build a better alignment around those 5 dimensions, such that they're more confident to go forward along that. There's so much to be done here in terms of coaching and guiding that I think, again, star performers do without even thinking about it, and core sellers just look like, say, not my problem, or I guess they're not ready, or I don't know, they just seem confused. And we just kind of step back and look at it and say, well, this stinks. We think we're takers, but we could be makers in this stuff.
Yeah, what a great sort of closing phrase, because we're running out of time. I could ask you
Yeah.
questions all day.
Yeah.
Pickers and makers. I love it. Mate, any final words?
Well, a quick thought. The whole idea of frame making is summed up in what we call the frame making mindset. The book will come out in the fall. Hopefully, fingers crossed, knock on wood, it'll be mildly successful. I don't know if we're going to hit lightning in a bottle again like we did with Challenger, but I think in many ways the ideas in this book are bigger and certainly more timely today. I'm really, really excited for people to read it. But the one thing I would tell you real quick, Matt, is that I'm not looking to introduce a new sales methodology. It is like, okay, there was spin, there was Challenger, now there's frame making. I think of frame making, for whatever it's worth, and hopefully it's helpful for people, is not a methodology, but a mindset. It's a way of thinking about your role and your opportunity in customer engagement. Yes, there's tactics and there's all sorts of tips and tricks, and we get into the weeds and different techniques you can use. But at the end of the day, we sum it up with a mindset that I learned from a friend of mine who was a client to become a friend. His name is Brian Smith. He's a CEO at a cloud computing company called Expedient. And I've heard him say this to his entire company. He's one of these leaders we were talking about earlier. Is this remarkable leader. And I've heard him say on a number of occasions, Matt, to his team, we have one job. He said, our job is to help our customers make the best decision they possibly can in as little time as possible. And he said, if we can do that, and someone will always ask, but Brian, what happens if we help make a great decision and the great decisions that go someone else? He said, that's why we want to do it as little time as possible, because if we're going to lose, I want to lose early. He said, but let me tell you, he says, if we can adopt that posture of just our goal, that's all we're trying to do, is just help you make really good decisions that you feel good about. Even if you choose not to go with us this time, we'll be the first one you call next time, because we're that company that helps you feel better about yourself. And I think, to me, Matt, that's where this book is really tapping into this very human element of, I was in my keynotes and I actually ended the book the same way, which is, I'll do it very briefly for time. But when you think about your own personal life and the people in your life, hopefully, Matt, you've got, people that are really close to you and are very meaningful, the relationships, whether with spouse or children or parents or someone you really love. And I think if we're all lucky, we have at least one or two people in our life where we can say to ourselves, I love you, not just because I love you, but I love you because I love me when I'm around you. And that's a really special relationship. That person, when you think of them, you just kind of smile because you love the version of you that they bring out. And that, to me, is, as sort of a more practical level, is what I'm really thinking about. This is what I'm trying to bring to sales, is what would it take to be that kind of salesperson to engage customers in such a way that as a result of the sales interaction, the customer likes themselves just a little bit more. And I think that's a massive unlock for the next 5 to 10 years. And that's at least my hope. There's a final thought for you.
Fantastic final thought. And it's a long way along. It's far further along than a trusted advisor.
It totally is. That I think the trusted advisor becomes an output of this. Right? If you do this, you just become someone's trusted advisor. But I think to walk into the room and say, I'm here to become your trusted advisor, therefore I'm going to say these things. Again, you fall back into this. I'm going to tell you what you need to know. I'm going to solve for know, not feel. And I'm going to solve for expert, not connector. And so the original trusted advisor, Larry Green, is a genius. He's a really, really good human being. And the stuff that he came up with has just been so kind of lost. And I think in some ways, this frame making idea and what we're talking about here is much closer to what he originally meant by trusted advisor, because it's something that just happens naturally. You become a trusted advisor by doing these things, as opposed to going in with the intention of, I declare myself a trusted advisor, if that makes any sense.
Great points. Brent, thanks so much for your time, mate.
Absolutely, Matt. Thank you, man. Appreciate it.